What's up everybody, I'm Private Hudson. I'm sick as shit, and this is Wrack for the PC. Wrack is an old school first-person shooter and is one of the few games that made it through Steam Greenlight, Early Access, and finalized into an actual finished product. The moment you start playing the game, you can tell this is an old school FPS. Your movement speed is ridiculously fast. I'm not sprinting here, there is no sprint, it's your default speed. Soundtrack is done by the legendary Bobby Prince, who was the composer for games like Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, Duke Nukem 3D, Rise of the Triad, and many others during the classic era of first-person shooters. Wrack doesn't have regenerating health, doesn't have a 2-weapon limit, doesn't have any of that modern FPS bullshit. The levels are large and the goal is to get to the exit, which is always blocked. Levels have several sections where they diverge, and it is in these areas where you'll find switches to hit that'll unlock whatever's blocking the exit. There's also secrets around, where you can find more health, armor, extra lives, or gold to improve your score. Wrack is a frantic, fast-paced, and difficult first-person shooter. As a huge fan of old FPS games, I was really excited to play this. The first video game I ever played in my life was Wolfenstein 3D. I spent a huge amount of my childhood years playing nothing but Doom and the various WADs for it. Unfortunately, Wrack does not do a good job of recreating the old-school shooter experience. There's a lot of problems with it. I'm not even sure what they were going for. In Wolfenstein, you killed Nazis. In Doom, you killed zombies and demons. In Duke Nukem, you killed meaty aliens and pig cops. In Wrack, you kill robot spiders and walking alien lizards. That's pretty much it. There's barely any diversity in Wrack. As a matter of fact, the game lacks content in general. There's only 8 levels and it'll take you 3 hours to get through them. There's only 5 weapons and it's the standard affair. A melee weapon, which in this case is a sword, a pistol, a shotgun, a plasma rifle, and a rocket launcher. The enemies are mostly palette swaps. You have brown robot spiders, and you have red robot spiders, and the red ones go Allahu Akbar and explode whenever they're near you. Both of them make super annoying noises that sound like a fucking beeping alarm clock. As far as the lizards are concerned, there's a female one that dies in like a hit. Then there's 3 variations of the male one. They all look the same, and they're just color swaps. The blue one takes like 2 shotgun shells to the face to kill, the white one absorbs a little more damage, and the red one is a fucking bullshit aimbot, I swear to god. Unless you run behind a wall, he is going to shoot you for a fuck ton of damage with this sniper rifle. Even if you're fucking standing right behind him. It's ridiculous. Who the fuck designed this and thought this was a good idea? And the lizards sound just as annoying as the spiders. Instead of going beep boop, beep boop, beep boop, they have this fucking annoying screeching noise. It's like fucking nails on a chalkboard. The only other enemies are little flying circular robots that shoot lasers at you, and a big-ass, poorly animated golem that smacks the ground. Old school shooters were about having huge levels with a maze-like design, extremely violent and visceral combat, and an arsenal of awesome weapons. Wrack has none of that. The levels are decent, I'll give it that much, especially when you compare it to modern shooters, but they're far too predictable and amateurish in design. You spawn, you walk into a big room, you kill everything in it, and then you're given 2 directions to go, left or right. You pick one, you proceed to go all the way down to the end, kill everything in sight until you hit a switch. Return to the center, main room, and go in the opposite direction. Do the same thing, run all the way to the end, hit the switch, it'll unlock the exit. Return to the main center room, head for the exit. That's pretty much every single level in this game. As far as the violence and combat is concerned, just take a look at this aesthetic. It's cel-shaded. The game looks like 13, you know that first-person shooter with David Duchovny? I'm not saying that a cel-shaded game can't be violent. Hell, take a look at Fear Effect for the PS1, but come on man, even Team Fortress 2 is more violent than Wrack is. Combat in old-school shooters is supposed to be meaty. In Rise of the Triad, that came out back in 1995, when you blow up someone with a bazooka, your screen is covered in blood and eyeballs. That was fucking awesome. Your guns had a huge impact and you could feel the results. Guns in old school shooters sounded awesome and packed a huge amount of damage that was represented by the remains of your enemies. In Wrack, your guns feel like cardboard. None of them are meaty, none of them are satisfying to use. The shotgun feels underpowered as it takes at least 2 shots to kill even the weaker enemies. The plasma rifle's firing animation is piss poor as it's nothing more than the same sprite repeated over and over again. I mean yeah, Doom did this, but Doom came out in 1993. The only time you ever see gore in Wrack is if you kill an enemy with your sword, your rocket launcher, or if the walking golem smacks the ground, but even then it's just red color splattered around. Gore isn't necessary in a shooter to make it fun. but it is one way to represent meaty combat and show just how powerful your weapons are. I mean, if you think I'm taking a piss, there's a game called Hard Reset. It came out a few years ago. All the enemies in that game are robots. There's no blood, there's no gore. That game still pulled off meaty combat by having robots explode into scraps of metal and junk, or lay on the floor disabled with their wires sparking after you were done with them. It also helped that in that game you could fucking shoot lightning. Here, you shotgun a lizard to the face, he just screeches and falls down. Where's the impact? Wrack's gimmick is that by racking up, you get it, haha, kills one after another, you charge up a little bar. Once at least one bar is full, you can press right mouse button to unleash a super attack. Pretty pointless as you aren't given many chances to chain kills, so I ended up rarely using it. Some of the levels have annoying platforming, as well as instant death traps, but I think the most annoying part of the game is that it's just so claustrophobic. As large as the levels are, the rooms are small, and every single door requires pressing the F key to open. So you walk into a room and all of a sudden you realize there's a fuck ton of enemies. You run low on HP, so you decide to run out of the room and look for the health pack. You turn around, you have to find the door, you have to press F again to open it. You run out. Unlike Doom, enemies here can't open doors, so they're not going to chase you. And when you return, all the enemies that were in that room are going to be clogged right up behind that fucking door. Doom and Duke Nukem gave you large rooms to fight in. They also gave you a whole bunch of levels that took place outdoors. Wrack does none of that. All the levels are indoors, and all the rooms are small. There's no way to avoid getting shot. Enemies don't even seem to understand the concept of elevation. They don't seem to chase after you if you run up or down a flight of stairs. They don't jump down to fight you if you are a level below them. I almost rage quit near the end of the game because of this. There's one level that had a few jumping platforms at the end of it. Each one would shoot you up to a higher floor. In the last room, as soon as you walk a few steps, a whole bunch of enemies start spawning. I ended up running low on rocket ammo, so I jumped back down to the lower floor. Unfortunately, this made it impossible for me to even reach the higher floor again. Why? Because every time I jump up through the hole, there'd be a dozen enemies circling around it, making it possible for me to get the fuck up. There's no way for me to land anywhere. I jump up, and there they are. Whole bunch of fucking enemies around me. It's impossible for me to progress through this. What the fuck? Did you playtest your own fucking game? How is this good design? After a few tries, I said fuck it. I jump up and I just run for the fucking exit. It eventually worked. Oh, there's a couple of boss fights thrown in here and there, but none of them are interesting. The attack patterns are pretty predictable, and they just take a shit ton of bullets to kill. The last thing there is to say about this game, which I don't even really care about, is the awful story. In between every few levels, there's poorly written dialogue. Something about aliens invading, and because at Earth we have everything we ever need now, so we don't have an army, and turns out your only character is the only one who could stop them. It's bad, it's pointless, and the developers' time should have been spent somewhere else. To sum things up, Wrack is as dull as dishwater. Wrack lacks interesting level design. It's always the same fork in the road. Go to both directions, trigger switches, open up the exit. Done. Wrack lacks interesting enemies. You got robot spiders and walking lizards. Wrack lacks interesting weapons. It's your bog standard affair. And even the soundtrack isn't very good. I love Bobby Prince. He is a legend, but he's been retired for a long time and it shows. The soundtrack for this game sounds more like his work for Commander Keen than it does for Doom. I'm sorry, but it takes more than having a cheesy metal soundtrack, fast movement, health and armor pickups, and multiple weapons to recreate the old school shooter experience. Wrack just ends up being a dull and boring experience. The only thing it had going for it was integration with the Steam Workshop, but I guess due to low sales, there's barely anything on there. Someone recreated the first level of Wolfenstein 3D and Quake. That's neat, but they only take like 30 seconds to finish due to the insane speed of your character. Another guy redid the first episode of Doom. It's kind of neat, but entirely pointless to play though. You're better off just playing the original Doom through a source port like Doomsday to have it running in high resolution, since the combat, the level design, the weapons, the monsters, so on and so forth, is far more satisfying than it is here. What also upsets me about this is that the developer is extremely bitter about the response the game received. Wrack is only one episode with 8 levels. It takes 3 hours to beat and it costs $15. If we were living back in the early to mid 90s, this would be considered shareware. Hell, I know shareware games that were longer than this. Back when the game was in early access, the devs said there'd be more episodes. Hell, during early access, the game even had episode 2 and 3 listed on the main menu. They were eventually removed though. Unfortunately, the game didn't do so well, so no further episodes were in development or even planned. One of the devs even writes in the Steam forums, "The game you want exists already. Therefore, there's no point in further Wrack episodes or Wrack 2 existing." And he writes some other dramatic nonsense like, "That's just the reality of the situation. There being no place for this game, unfortunately." I mean, come on, man. People said the same thing about point-and-click adventure games, and look what happened to the Kickstarter for Broken Age. People said the same thing about old-school computer RPGs, and look what happened to the Kickstarters for Wasteland 2, Pillars of Eternity, Divinity Original Sin, and so on and so forth. There is a market for everything, especially old-school shooters. I love old-school shooters. I wish there were more of them. By saying there is no market for your game, you are ignoring the issue at hand. You shouldn't be asking if there is a market for your game. You should be asking, does your game meet the expectations of the people who love this kind of genre? And from my opinion in this review, no, it does not. The last thing I'd like to mention was, when the game launched, it had severe performance issues, and it lacked quick saving. It had a checkpoint-based save system. A checkpoint-based save system in an old-school shooter? I'm sorry, but I really don't think the developers understood who their target audience was. I'm glad they ended up patching it in, but it still doesn't make any sense. Why would they release the game like that? All in all, Wrack is not worth $15 for 3 hours of repetitive bland content. If you really are craving for an old school shooter experience, then pick it up when it's on sale. You might have some fun with it, and like the first 2 or 3 levels, they're pretty fun.